We bring in super friend to the show. He is Scott Petrak, and of course, you can catch him all the time on brownzone.com. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Scott. I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Is this Nate Scheelhaase's job today to take or not take?
I don't know if it's that clear. He's only interviewed once, right? And the most you could do was 3 hours on Zoom or whatever remote platform you want to use. So I feel like the second interview matters. When they sit down in person and, he's got to present his case and they ask him questions and all that stuff. So while I think he's probably the favorite, I think it'd be a little presumptuous to say that his job before he has a second interview.
What do you think's a bigger sell? Nate Scheelhaase selling himself to the Browns or the Browns selling themselves to Nate Scheelhaase?
Yeah, it feels like the Browns selling themselves to Scheelhaase, doesn't it? After
it does.
McDaniel withdraws and then Udinski withdraws today. It's such an interesting dynamic because you're young, you're looking for your first head coaching job. It feels like he's 2 steps away because he's not a coordinator or a play caller, just a pass game coordinator. So is that guaranteed to happen next year? You don't know, but you also don't want your first job to be in a situation that you think is not a winner. And who knows? I mean, he could turn it around. People turn organizations around all the time, but there's no homemade quarterback or ready-made quarterback you're walking into unless you think Shedeur's the guy. It's not Buffalo. It's not Baltimore when you look at the other jobs that have been out there this cycle. So I do think the Browns have to show him that, they're willing to give him time and they're willing to give him they will give him all the resources he needs and he would need to succeed and have him believe that. And I don't think that's, an impossible sell. Kevin Stefanski took this job 6 years ago and I think it looked like a worse job 6 years ago than it does today. So it can be done, but I do think that's part of it is convincing him that this is a job we're taking.
Tell me about what you think the look of this job is right now, especially when you hear Udinski's out and you've had other guys drop out, and it doesn't feel good. How's that sound? Is it doesn't have that? It doesn't. If I'm a fan, I'm like, what? Why does it feel like we're getting turned down?
Yeah, I get that. It doesn't look good at all, and there's reasons for it. And to me, the 2 reasons are there's no guaranteed stud quarterback that you're walking into, right? And it's different at other organizations. I mentioned Buffalo and Baltimore. Those are the 2 perfect examples of, they got their quarterbacks. I can go win there. And the other is the history of the organization for the last 27 years. And even since the Haslam's took over in 2012, bought the team, it's been a lot of instability. And that changed to a good degree over the last 6 years, right? And I think that's a positive step. And I think the Haslam's learned some things from the first however many coaches they fired between 2012 and 2020 when they hired Kevin and Andrew Berry. But there is a history. And, when we talked about it last week, I think, when you look at Kevin Stefanski's quick hiring in Atlanta, it says a lot about Kevin and it says a lot about how the league views Cleveland and that Stefanski had success there. So I don't think that what's called stigma has gone away and people look and go, hey, is this owner really stable? Will he give me a chance? Are they too analytics driven? Whatever, all those concerns you hear about the Browns, I think when they're looking to hire a head coach and a couple guys back out of the process, I think those are the reasons they would do that.
Scott Petrak joining us from brownzone.com. Let's look at it from the Browns' perspective. And, Dan and I have said all along, we would love to find your own Sean McVay here, your guy who you develop and everything else. 2 years in the NFL and none as a coordinator.
Yep.
Does that make Scheelhaase a huge risk, or is it like, boy, are we cutting edge and we're going to beat everybody to the punch?
Well, I think it's a risk. I think when you compare him to Grant Udinski, right, who was the other young up-and-comer with kind of a thin resume, if we can call it that,
yeah.
Scheelhaase has, I think, a much more complete resume.
Because
he played
of his
quarterback
college experience at Iowa State?
Yes. Well, and the fact that he played quarterback at a high level in the Big Ten, right? So you assume he knows quarterbacking, which is crucial in this job. Then he went on to Iowa State and called plays and was a coordinator. So he stood in front of a room, or, maybe not the entire room like a head coach does, but a big room. And he did that there. And Grant Udinski was coordinator for this year in Jacksonville, but he's never been a position coach. He's never called plays, never been a head coach. So I think Scheelhaase does have a fuller resume, and I think you can kind of sink your teeth in that and go, okay, if this guy has the personality, if you think he can be the leader, whatever Sean McVay says about him in a positive way, you go, okay, we think this guy is ready. I think it's more about the resume than even the age, at 35. I think there's plenty to like about Scheelhaase, but when you've never done it, right, you've never called plays at this level, you never run an offense at this level, those are certainly concerns, but we've seen plenty of people have success without having that background, but it's certainly a risk.
I'm just curious, after watching yesterday's game, how far away are the Browns? I mean, we saw a game, excuse me, maybe because of the snow, that the offense wasn't rolling. How far away is this team?
Yeah, I mean, that game's tough to tell. But you look at Seattle, right? Seattle goes 14-3 this year and gets the number 1 seed and is in the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying they don't have a good offense because they have an unbelievable receiver. And Sam Darnold played at a high level yesterday, played at a high level this season. They have a good running back. So they have an offense too. But their calling card is their defense, right? Could the Browns have the Seahawks defense? Sure, right? The defense is that good. So you just have to get the other side of the ball figured out. And you can say that that's a huge just have to, or you can say, okay, you know exactly where you want to put your resources, and you need to make sure you have the quarterback. Whether that he's in the building right now or he's not, you got to make sure you have the quarterback. And that's always going to be the number one thing that keeps any team from getting where it needs to go. So you got to figure out quarterback. So, I don't have that answer right now, but if you figure out quarterback, then it's, okay, you need to bring in 2 or 3 linemen and another receiver or 2. Like, that doesn't feel like that big a stretch to me. Like, you can figure those things out in 1 or 2 off seasons. It's solving the quarterback issue, whether he's in the building or whether he's not. That's always going to be, and right now is the number one issue facing this team once they find their head coach.
What do you think Andrew Berry, Jimmy Haslam, Tom Telesco, if Tom is on these interviews, former GM of the Chargers, who is in on the committee apparently, what do you think they are telling candidates about the quarterback situation here?
Well, I think they're probably looking for feedback, number one. Okay, what's your thought? Right, there's 3 guys in the building right now. What are your opinions on those guys? And then what are your opinions on Mac Jones and Malik Willis and whoever else are those candidates that we've talked about, right? The veteran candidates through trade or free agency.
Jimmy G,
right?
Who's
Jimmy
with the Rams?
G? Sure. Daniel Jones, Jared Stidham, a possibility. I thought of yesterday if he'd played great and took him to the Super Bowl, that all of a sudden he becomes, a hot guy. And then like Nate Scheelhaase or Jim Schwartz, they probably haven't watched a whole lot of film on the college quarterback, so that's probably unfair. So you want their opinion, and then you tell them what you think about your guys. And I don't sense a commitment to Deshaun Watson as the answer, right? I expect him to be here next year, but I don't think the Browns are forcing Deshaun Watson on any potential candidate. But it'd be interesting to hear what they say about Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel, but mostly Shedeur Sanders. If they're saying, hey, we think this guy can be the guy, right? And if they're not forcing, but if they're pushing that on the new coach, I think that would go a long way in what that candidate would think about the job, right? Hey, are they making me work with this quarterback who I may have liked or I may not have liked coming out in the draft, who I haven't seen a ton of in the pros? I would hope, if I were running it, that the Browns weren't putting that as a mandate, right? You have to accept this quarterback. Andrew Berry said January 5th that the new coach would have a lot of input on what they did at quarterback, and I think that's how they have to run it. But I'm sure there'll be a long discussion about Shedeur and Dylan and Deshaun.
I'm just wondering, do you think they pushed Shedeur and Kevin then? And why wouldn't they change their mind on the next quarterback or the next head coach they would bring in? See what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I kind of felt like they pushed him on Kevin, especially when you take away the 2 veterans, and then unfortunately your other guy got hurt, Why wouldn't they want that on the next head coach? I'm just interested.
Well, they might. I mean, you might be right. They might. I just think that's the wrong way to operate. And I think that probably limits your pool of candidates. So maybe that has something to do with this. Andrew Berry did not, said the opposite, but, for whatever that's worth. We could talk about Shedeur all day. I thought he made a bunch of improvements. I didn't think in those 7 games he showed enough to say without a doubt that he can be the starter that takes you to the playoffs in 2026, right? And I know there's plenty of people that disagree out there. There's plenty of people that think there's no way he can do it. I don't think that – I just couldn't make that decision. I don't think the sample size is big enough for me to say one way or the other he can or can't be the guy. Maybe they say, hey, we want to give him 2026 as an organization. And then it's up to the coach to say, okay, well, if he isn't the guy, then you're going to be patient with me, right? Because you're handing me a quarterback and telling me to play him. I just think that creates some difficult situations, right? To put that on a coach and say you're forced to have this guy when he hasn't proven himself at that level, right? I don't think he's established himself as a starting quarterback in this league to this point. I think it's difficult for a coach to force him to accept that. And when it goes back to Kevin, yeah, they certainly forced the rookies on Kevin by the way they handled the roster, right? Trading Kenny Pickett and then trading Joe Flacco was okay. It's these 2 rookies. And then Dylan Gabriel got hurt, so there's no choice but to play Shedeur Sanders. So I don't know. I don't know if they certainly forced that situation on the team, and so did the losing at the beginning of the year. It became a reality situation where, hey, they're not going to make the playoffs, so you want to see these rookies. And it puts Kevin in a really difficult spot, and we can talk about the wins and losses, mattering or not mattering with Kevin Stefanski. So I completely get your point, Andy. I just don't think that's the right way to operate.
I agree.
Scott, should we actually be looking at Anthony Lynn as a real candidate here? He worked for Tom Telesco in San Diego. He's got a great background, was here before.
Yeah, I mean, he had a winning record as a head coach, right, which is not easy to find. I knew they fell off in his last 2 years with the Chargers. I think he started 9-7 and then 12-4, and they won a playoff game, and then they flipped. I want to say 5-11 and 7-9. But yeah, I would not dismiss him. Obviously, he only had the one interview, late getting added to this process. For whatever reason that is. I think the focus right now is Scheelhaase and Schwartz. But could that change? If Scheelhaase says no or the interview doesn't go well, could the Browns reevaluate and say, hey, let's take a longer look at Lynn? Sure. I don't think that's out of the question at all.
All right, so who does Scott Petrak want? Who is the best fit for this job
Scott,
right now?
Who do you want?
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, there's no bearing on the situation whatsoever. I think the ideal situation is probably Scheelhaase, and he keeps Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator. So it feels like the best of both worlds. I think if Jim Schwartz gets the job, I have no issue with Jim Schwartz being the next coach of the Browns. Then the question becomes, who would he hire as his coordinator and his quarterback's coach? And let's assume it's not Nate Scheelhaase, right? So if it were Schwartz as a head coach and Scheelhaase as a coordinator, I think that'd be great too. I just am not sure Scheelhaase takes that job and leaves the Rams to be the coordinator play caller. Maybe he would, right? Because it is a step up and you get to call plays and run your offense. So I think either of those combinations is fine and could work well, and you have your defense and you have your young offensive guy, right? What I would be worried about if it's Jim Schwartz is who's his coordinator. And maybe it's Todd Monken. And, I think Todd Monken's a good head coach or a good coordinator and a good play caller. I also think he could join John Harbaugh with the Jets or with the Giants. So if you don't have Monken or Scheelhaase as your coordinator, where does Jim Schwartz go? And I think that would be a concern because we talked about it. The offense needs to be fixed. So how are they going to fix this offense? Yes, they're going to do it with players, but they also need to do it with coaching and system. And I think that would be the huge question facing Jim Schwartz is what do you do at offensive coordinator? So I think by hiring Scheelhaase and keeping Schwartz to run the defense, you solve both those problems.
Last question, how long before they have a coach?
I think tomorrow by noon at the latest.
Tomorrow at noon, by noon. All right.
It.
Love it. Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Talk to you later.
Thank you,
Scott
Scott.
Petrak, Chronicle Telegram. Nice enough to join us today, as he does each and every Monday, on the Make It Right, Call Kyle Wright hotline.